Good evening, night owls and fledglings. I, Phantashistoria, welcome you to another dark parliament. Daniel Carmargo Barbosa was a psychopathic serial killer from Colombia, South America. It is believed that he raped and killed over 150 young girls in Colombia and Ecuador during the 1970s and 1980s. Carmargo's mother died when he was a little boy and his father was overbearing and emotionally distant. He was raised by an abusive stepmother, who punished him and sometimes dressed him in girls' clothing, making him a victim of ridicule in front of his peers. He was first arrested in Bogota on May 24, 1958 for petty theft. Carmargo had a de facto union with a woman named Alcira and had 2 children with her. He fell in love with another woman, Esperanza, aged 28, whom he planned to marry, but then found out that she was not a virgin. This became a deep root of Carmargo's fixations, and he and Esperanza formed an agreement that he would stay with her if she aided him in finding other virgin girls to have sex with. This began a period of their partnership in crime. Esperanza was Carmargo's accomplice, luring young girls to an apartment under false pretenses and then drugging them with sodium seconal sleeping pills so that Carmargo could rape them. Carmargo committed 5 rapes in this way, but did not kill any of the girls. The 5th child that they abused in this way reported the crime, and both Carmargo and Esperanza were arrested and taken to separate prisons. Carmargo was convicted of sexual assault in Colombia on April 10, 1964. A judge sentenced Carmargo to 3 years in prison, and Carmargo was initially grateful for the perceived leniency of the judge, swearing to repent and mend his ways. However, a new judge was given precedence over the case and Carmargo was sentenced to 8 years in prison. This provoked Carmargo to rebellious anger. He served his full sentence and was released. In 1973, he was arrested in Brazil for being undocumented. Due to a delay in sending Carmargo's criminal records from Colombia, he was deported and released with his false identity. When he returned to Colombia, he took up a job as a street vendor in Barranquilla selling television monitors. One day, when passing by a school, he kidnapped a 9-year-old girl, raping her and murdering her so that she could not inform the police like his previous victim had. This was his first assault involving murder. Carmargo was arrested on May 3, 1974 in Barranquilla, Colombia, when he returned to the scene of the crime to recover the television screens that he had forgotten beside the victim. Even though it is believed that he raped and killed more than 80 girls in Colombia, Carmargo was imprisoned in Colombia after being convicted of raping and killing a 9-year-old girl. He was initially sentenced to 30 years in prison, but this sentence was reduced to 25 years, and he was interned in the prison on the island of Gorgona, Colombia on December 24, 1977. In November 1984, Carmargo escaped from Gorgona in a primitive boat after having carefully studied the ocean currents. The authorities assumed that he died at sea and the press reported that he had been eaten by sharks. He eventually arrived in Quito, Ecuador. He then traveled by bus to Guayaquil on 5 or December 6, 1984. On December 18, he abducted a 9-year-old girl from the city of Quevedo, in the province of Los Rios, Ecuador. The next day, a 10-year-old girl also disappeared. From 1984 to 1986, Carmargo committed a series of at least 54 rapes and murders in Guayaquil. The police at first believed that all the deaths were the work of a gang, not understanding that one man could have killed so many. Carmargo slept on the streets and lived off of the money he could gain by reselling ballpoint pens in the streets. Occasionally, he supplemented his income by selling clothing or small valuables belonging to his victims. Camargo selected helpless, young, lower-class girls in search of work and approached them, pretending to be a foreigner who needed to find a Protestant pastor in a church on the outskirts of town. He explained that he had to deliver a large sum of money, which he showed them as proof, and he offered them a reward if they would accompany him to show him the way. He pretended that he was a stranger to the area, and hinted at the possibility of the girls getting a job at the factory. No one was suspicious of an older man accompanying a girl or young woman who could be his granddaughter. Carmargo would then enter into the woods, claiming to be looking for a shortcut in order to avoid arousing suspicion in his victims. If the girls grew suspicious and drew back, he did not prevent them from leaving. Camargo raped his victims before strangling them, sometimes stabbing them when they resisted. After his victims were dead, he left their bodies in the forest to be picked clean by scavengers. Camargo was arrested by two policemen in Quito on February 26, 1986, only a few minutes after he had murdered a 9-year-old girl named Elizabeth. The policemen were on patrol and approached him at the height of the Avenue Los Granados, thinking that he was acting suspicious. They were surprised to find that he was carrying with him a bag containing the bloody clothes of his latest victim, and a copy of Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky. He was taken into custody and later moved to Guayaquil for identification. When he was arrested, he gave a false name, Manuel Bulgarin Solis, but he was later identified by one of his rape victims, who escaped. Daniel Carmargo very calmly confessed to killing 71 girls in Ecuador since escaping from the Colombian prison. He led authorities to the dumping grounds of those victims whose bodies had not yet been recovered. The bodies had been dismembered. While he told the Ecuadorian authorities of the locations of the bodies and how the sadistic crimes were committed, he showed no feelings of remorse. After raping his victims, he had hacked, slashed, and crushed the girls with a machete. He gave a cynical explanation for choosing children. He wanted virgins because they cried. This apparently gave him greater satisfaction. According to Camargo, he killed because he wanted revenge on women's unfaithfulness. He hated them for not being what women are supposed to be. His victims were all virgins. In June 1986, Francisco Febra Cordero, a journalist for Hoy Today newspaper, managed to arrange an interview with Camargo. It was difficult to get the interview due to the police blocking all access to Camargo, and the fact that Camargo himself demanded a large fee before he would let himself be interviewed. The journalist pretended to be part of a group of psychologists that were allowed access to the prisoner, allowing him to ask Camargo questions without arousing his suspicion. Afterward, Francisco Febra Cordero described him as highly intelligent. He had an answer for everything and was able to speak of God and the devil equally. Well-read, he cited Hesse, Vargas Llosa, Garcia Marquez, Guimarães Rosa, Nietzsche, Stendhal and Freud, all knowledge that he acquired from a literary education during his time in prison on the Isle of Gorgona. Camargo was convicted in 1989 and sentenced to 16 years in prison, the maximum sentence available in Ecuador. While serving his sentence in the Garcia Moreno de Quito jail, he claimed to have converted to Christianity. In this penitentiary, he was imprisoned with Pedro Alonso Lopez, the monster of the Andes, who is believed to have raped and killed more than 300 girls in Colombia, Ecuador and Peru. It was reported that in November 1994, he was murdered in prison by Luis Mosaic Narvaez, the cousin of one of his victims. Thanks for listening. This was Phantashistoria. Please flock over to our socials and subscribe to be summoned to our next Dark Parliament.